Lily was looking at a picture of the Sphinx when she said it. Her mother, Catherine, remembers the exact moment because the afternoon light was coming through the kitchen window at that particular angle it only reaches in late October, casting long shadows across the breakfast table where they sat together, flipping through a National Geographic magazine that had arrived in the mail that morning. Catherine had been pointing out different landmarks to her daughter, the way parents do when they want to share something beautiful with their children, and Lily had been politely interested in the Eiffel Tower, mildly curious about the Great Wall of China, and completely indifferent to the Colosseum. But when they turned to the page featuring the Great Sphinx of Giza, something changed in her daughter's face. It was subtle at first, a slight tilt of the head, a narrowing of the eyes, the kind of expression you might see on someone trying to remember where they left their keys. Except this was a 5-year-old girl who had never left the state of Colorado, looking at a photograph of a monument built 4,500 years ago on the other side of the world. "Where is the other one?" Lily asked. Catherine laughed, assuming her daughter was confused. "What other one, sweetheart?" she replied, pointing at the photograph. "This is the Sphinx. There is only one. It is in Egypt." But Lily shook her head with a certainty that made Catherine pause. "No," Lily said, her small finger pressing against the glossy page. "There are two. There were always two. Where is the other one?" This was the beginning of something that would consume their family for the next 14 months. Something that would lead Catherine down research paths she never expected to travel, into conversations with archaeologists who asked her never to share their names, and eventually to a discovery that made her question everything she thought she understood about her daughter, about history, and about the nature of memory itself. The Matthews family lives in a quiet suburb of Denver, in a house with a blue door and a backyard that backs up against a small creek. Catherine works as a paralegal at a law firm downtown. Her husband, Thomas, manages a hardware store that has been in his family for 3 generations. They have 2 children, Lily, who was 5 at the time of this story, and her younger brother, Owen, who had just turned 3. By every measure, they are an ordinary American family. They go to church on Sundays, host barbecues in the summer, and spend their vacations visiting Catherine's parents in Nebraska. Nothing in their lives had prepared them for what Lily would begin to remember. In the days following the magazine incident, Lily became increasingly insistent about the second Sphinx. At first, Catherine tried to redirect her attention, the way parents do when children fixate on ideas that seem fantastical. But Lily would not let it go. She began drawing pictures, dozens of them. Each one showed 2 large cat-like figures facing each other, their paws almost touching. In some drawings, they appeared to be looking at each other. In others, they both faced forward, staring at something beyond the edge of the paper. The level of detail was unusual for a 5-year-old. Lily drew the headdresses with careful attention to their stripes. She drew the chins jutting forward in a way that suggested she understood the statues were meant to represent something regal, something powerful. Catherine showed the drawings to Thomas one evening after the children had gone to bed. They spread them across the kitchen table, more than 30 drawings in total, and Thomas studied them with the same analytical attention he brought to inventory spreadsheets. "These are remarkably consistent," he said finally. "Look at the proportions. Look at where she places them relative to each other. She is not just imagining random Sphinx shapes. She is drawing the same 2 figures from different angles, over and over again." The thing that bothered Catherine most was the feminine one. In every drawing, Lily made a clear distinction between the 2 Sphinxes. One was the Sphinx they all recognized from photographs, with its masculine face and broken nose. But the other was different. Lily drew it with softer features, fuller lips, and what appeared to be a different style of headdress. When Catherine asked about this, Lily explained it as though stating the obvious. "One is the king and one is the queen," she said. "They are married. They protect the path together." "What path?" Catherine asked. "The path to where the sun goes at night," Lily replied. Then she went back to her drawing without another word. Catherine began researching. At first, she approached it as a debunking mission. She assumed that Lily must have seen something somewhere, a movie, a television show, a book at the library, that planted the idea of two sphinxes in her mind. Children absorb information from everywhere, and sometimes they mix things up, creating new memories from fragments of stories they have heard. Catherine was certain that if she dug deep enough, she would find the source. She would show it to Lily, they would laugh about it, and the obsession would fade. But the source did not exist. Catherine searched their entire house. She went through every book, every DVD, every educational program they had ever recorded. She checked Lily's school library and interviewed her kindergarten teacher. She asked relatives if anyone had told Lily stories about Egypt. The answer was always no. More troublingly, Catherine discovered that the idea of a second Sphinx was not something common in popular culture. When people depicted ancient Egypt in movies or cartoons, they showed only one Sphinx. The concept of twin Sphinxes was not a widespread myth or a common children's story. It was, by all accounts, an obscure historical debate that existed only in the margins of Egyptological research. This is when Catherine found Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell is a professor of ancient Near Eastern studies at a university in the southwestern United States. She has spent 23 years studying ancient Egyptian monuments, with a particular focus on the Giza Plateau. When Catherine first reached out to her through a university email address she found online, she expected to be ignored. Professors receive hundreds of messages from strangers, most of them easily dismissed. But Dr. Mitchell responded within 48 hours. Her reply was brief but intriguing. She wrote, "The second Sphinx is not a new theory, but it is one that most of my colleagues prefer to dismiss. I would be interested in speaking with you about your daughter." Their first phone call lasted nearly 2 hours. Dr. Mitchell explained that for centuries there have been whispers among Egyptologists about the possibility of a companion monument to the Great Sphinx. The evidence is circumstantial but persistent. Ancient Egyptian art almost always depicted guardians in pairs. Temple gates were flanked by twin statues. Sacred paths were lined with matching figures. The idea that the Sphinx would stand alone, without a counterpart, was actually unusual in the context of Egyptian symbolic architecture. But there is more than just symbolic reasoning, Dr. Mitchell continued. There is physical evidence. In the 1980s, a team of seismologists conducting underground surveys near the Sphinx discovered a series of anomalies in the bedrock approximately 100 meters to the south of the known monument. The patterns were consistent with large-scale carved surfaces beneath the sand. When they brought their findings to the Egyptian authorities, they were told that no further investigation would be permitted in that area. The official reason given was that the zone was too close to existing archaeological sites and that excavation could cause structural damage. But some researchers believed the real reason was different. Some believed the authorities already knew what was there and had decided, for reasons unknown, that it should remain buried. Catherine asked the question that had been forming in her mind throughout the conversation. "Are you saying there might actually be a second Sphinx under the sand?" Dr. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "What I am saying," she replied carefully, "is that your daughter is describing something that aligns with one of the oldest unresolved mysteries in Egyptian archaeology. Either she has somehow accessed research papers that most adults have never read, or she is remembering something that she could not possibly know through normal means. Neither explanation is easy to accept. The phrase normal means hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. It is the kind of question that keeps you awake at night. The kind of question that has no comfortable answer. And if you have ever asked yourself a similar question about something you could not explain, you already know exactly what Catherine was feeling in that moment. That strange mixture of fear and fascination. The sense that the world might be larger and stranger than you ever allowed yourself to believe. Over the following months, Dr. Mitchell began working with the Matthews family. She approached the situation with scientific rigor, careful not to lead Lily with suggestive questions or to impose interpretations on what the child said. Instead, she let Lily speak freely, recording their conversations and documenting every detail. What emerged was a narrative so detailed, so internally consistent, and so aligned with obscure historical evidence that it defied easy explanation. Lily described the second Sphinx as feminine in form, with the face of a queen rather than a king. She said it was slightly smaller than the male Sphinx, positioned to the south and facing inward, so that the two monuments formed a sacred gateway. The path between them, she explained, was the ceremonial road that priests and pharaohs walked during specific rituals related to the journey of the sun through the underworld. At sunset, when the light fell between the two Sphinxes, it created a shadow pattern on the sand that indicated the proper alignment for prayer. Lily described this shadow pattern in detail, drawing it multiple times with colored pencils, always depicting the same geometric shapes. When Dr. Mitchell compared Lily's drawings to known examples of ancient Egyptian astronomical alignment, she found unexpected parallels. The shadow patterns Lily drew were consistent with the angles of light that would occur on specific dates related to the Egyptian calendar. The positions she indicated for the two Sphinxes would create sightlines aligned with the rising of certain stars, including Sirius, which the ancient Egyptians associated with the goddess Isis. This was not information that a 5-year-old could invent. It was not information that most adults would know. Yet Lily drew it as casually as other children drew houses and trees. "The researchers are going to find her soon," Lily said one afternoon during a recording session. She was coloring while she spoke, her attention seemingly divided between her artwork and the conversation. "They already know she is there. They just do not want to look because they are afraid of what it means." "What do you mean?" Dr. Mitchell asked gently. "What are they afraid of?" Lily put down her crayon and looked up with an expression that seemed far too old for her face. "They are afraid, because if she is there, then everything they said about us is wrong. We were not who they said we were. We knew things. We built things. And they do not want to admit that they do not understand." Dr. Mitchell later admitted that this was the moment when her scientific skepticism began to crack. It was not just what Lily said, but how she said it. The use of the word us. The implication that she had been part of the civilization that built these monuments. The casual certainty with which she spoke about knowledge that had been lost or suppressed. These were not the words of a child playing pretend. These were the words of someone remembering. Catherine noticed changes in Lily beyond her fixation on the Sphinx. She began expressing preferences that seemed out of character for a child her age. She refused to eat meat, explaining that the animals did not want to be eaten and that she could feel their sadness. She became fascinated with astronomy, asking her parents to wake her up before dawn so she could watch the stars fade. She developed a habit of drawing symbols that looked like hieroglyphics, though she insisted they were just letters from a game she played in her head. When Catherine looked up the symbols online, she discovered that several of them closely resembled actual hieroglyphic characters representing concepts like eternity, protection, and truth. The turning point came in February, approximately 4 months after the initial magazine incident. Dr. Mitchell had been compiling her research and had connected with colleagues who specialized in remote sensing technology. One of these colleagues, a geophysicist named Dr. Robert Freeman, had access to data from a ground-penetrating radar survey conducted near the Giza Plateau in 2019. This survey had been part of a broader study of subsurface water flow in the region, but it had captured images of the bedrock structure at depths of up to 50 meters. Dr. Freeman agreed to review the data, focusing specifically on the area south of the Sphinx, where historical anomalies had been reported. The results were stunning. At a depth of approximately 12 meters, the radar revealed a distinct geometric structure. The shape was roughly symmetrical, with what appeared to be carved surfaces descending at consistent angles. The dimensions were smaller than the known Sphinx, but within the range that Lily had described. Most remarkably, the orientation of the buried structure was precisely aligned with the positioning Lily had indicated in her drawings, facing north-northeast toward the location of the existing Sphinx. Dr. Freeman was cautious in his interpretation. Radar data can be misleading, he explained during a conference call with Dr. Mitchell and the Matthews family. Natural rock formations sometimes create patterns that look artificial. Erosion and sediment layers can produce symmetries that suggest construction when none exists. But he also acknowledged that this particular anomaly was unusual. The straight lines were too consistent. The angles were too precise. Whatever was buried there had characteristics that were difficult to explain through natural processes alone. Catherine asked the question that everyone was thinking. Is it possible that this is actually a second Sphinx? Dr. Freeman paused before answering. I cannot confirm that, he said finally. But I also cannot rule it out. If someone wanted to know for certain, they would need to excavate. And to my knowledge, no excavation has ever been approved for that specific area. The implications hung in the silence that followed. If Lily's memories were accurate, then beneath the sand of the Giza Plateau lay one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history, a monument that had been lost for thousands of years, hidden not by accident, but perhaps by intention. A companion to the Sphinx that would reshape everything we understood about ancient Egyptian civilization. And this revelation had come not from sophisticated satellite imaging or decades of academic research, but from the spontaneous utterances of a 5-year-old girl in Denver, Colorado, who had never been to Egypt and who could not possibly have known what she knew. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight for thousands of years, waiting for someone to remember it, waiting for someone to listen to the impossible and take it seriously. Lily continued to share memories over the months that followed, and each new detail added complexity to the picture she was painting. She spoke about her life in ancient Egypt with the same matter-of-fact tone that other children might use to describe their day at school. She remembered being part of a family that worked on the monuments, though not as builders. Her father, she said, had been responsible for the sacred measurements, the calculations that ensured the structures aligned with the stars. Her mother had prepared offerings for the rituals that took place between the twin guardians. Lily herself had been young, perhaps 6 or 7 years old in that life, and her primary memory was of watching the sunset ceremonies from a spot near the base of the female Sphinx. She described the texture of the stone, worn smooth by centuries of wind, but still carrying the marks of the tools that shaped it. She described the color, different from the current golden tan of the Sphinx, more of a pale cream that caught the light differently. She described the eyes, which had been painted and decorated with lapis lazuli, that made them seem alive when the sun hit them at certain angles. She described the smell of incense rising from the temple complex and the sound of chanting that echoed across the plateau as the sun touched the horizon. These were not the vague impressions of a child who had seen pictures. These were sensory memories, rich with detail and emotion. When Lily spoke about watching the ceremonies, her voice took on a quality of longing, as though she missed something precious that could never be recovered. She sometimes paused mid-description, her eyes unfocused, as if she were seeing something that was not in the room with her. Catherine learned to wait during these moments, not interrupting, allowing Lily to return from wherever her mind had traveled. The question of the female Sphinx's burial came up during a session in late spring. Dr. Mitchell had been asking about the ceremonies Lily remembered, trying to understand the religious significance of the twin guardians. Lily was explaining that the female Sphinx represented the nighttime aspect of protection, the guardian of souls as they traveled through the darkness toward rebirth. And then, without prompting, she said something that made Dr. Mitchell set down her notebook. They buried her because they were afraid, Lily said. The foreigners were coming, the ones who did not understand. And the priests decided it was better to hide her than to let them take her away. So they covered her with sand, and they made everyone forget. When did this happen? Dr. Mitchell asked, keeping her voice neutral. Lily thought for a moment. Before the river changed, she said, when the water still came to the walls, when the king with the short name was fighting. Dr. Mitchell later spent weeks trying to decode this description. The phrase "before the river changed" suggested a period when the Nile followed a different course than it does today. Geological evidence indicates that the Nile has shifted its path multiple times over millennia, with significant changes occurring around 3,000 years ago. The mention of water coming to the walls might refer to a time when the floodplains extended closer to the Giza Plateau, and the king with the short name fighting could potentially reference one of several pharaohs known for military campaigns during the late period, when Egypt faced invasions from Assyrians, Persians, and eventually Greeks. If Lily's timeline was accurate, the female Sphinx had been deliberately buried sometime between the 7th and 4th centuries before the Common Era, during a period of political instability and foreign occupation. This would explain why there are no clear references to a second Sphinx in the written records that survived from that period. The knowledge would have been deliberately suppressed, hidden from conquerors who might have destroyed or desecrated the monument. The priests who ordered the burial would have been the last people to know the truth, and they had taken that truth to their graves. Catherine often asked herself whether she believed what her daughter was saying. It was a question without a simple answer. On one level, the rational part of her brain resisted the implications. Past life memories were not something she had ever considered seriously. The idea that a child could remember events from thousands of years ago contradicted everything she understood about how memory and consciousness worked. And yet, Lily knew things she should not know. She described details that aligned with evidence that had never been published for general audiences. She drew symbols that matched ancient writing systems. She spoke about astronomical alignments that would have required specialized knowledge to invent. Thomas was more open to accepting what Lily was experiencing. He had always been someone who left room for mystery, who believed that science had not answered all the questions worth asking. When Catherine expressed her doubts late at night, whispering in their bedroom after the children were asleep, Thomas would remind her of all the phenomena that were once considered impossible until they were proven true. Continents drifting, particles that exist in two places at once, the universe expanding faster than light. Just because we do not understand something, Thomas said, does not mean it is not real. The question of what to do with the information became increasingly pressing. Dr. Mitchell was facing her own dilemma. As an academic, she had a responsibility to report significant findings through proper channels. The radar data alone was potentially important enough to warrant publication, but she also knew the reception that such a publication would receive. The scientific community was deeply skeptical of anything that suggested supernatural or paranormal explanations. If she published a paper claiming that a 5-year-old's past life memories had led to the discovery of a buried monument, her career would be finished. She would become a laughingstock, dismissed as a crank who had lost her objectivity. And then there was the question of the Egyptian authorities. Any excavation on the Giza Plateau required government approval, and the government had historically been resistant to investigations that challenged conventional narratives about Egyptian history. There were political reasons for this, economic reasons related to tourism, and perhaps other reasons that remained unspoken. Dr. Mitchell had heard rumors over the years about discoveries that had been quietly suppressed, about researchers who had been denied access after finding things that did not fit the official story. She did not know how much of this was true and how much was conspiracy thinking, but she knew enough to be cautious. The Matthews family decided to take a step back from the research. Lily was still only 5 years old, and her parents worried about the impact that all this attention was having on her development. They wanted her to have a normal childhood, to play with friends, and learn to read and not carry the weight of archaeological mysteries on her small shoulders. Catherine thanked Dr. Mitchell for her time and dedication, and they agreed to stay in touch, but to pause the formal documentation process. Lily, for her part, seemed largely unaffected by the decision. She continued to draw her twin sphinxes occasionally, but with less frequency. She stopped bringing up her memories unprompted, though she would still answer questions if asked. When Catherine told her that they were going to take a break from talking to Dr. Mitchell, Lily simply nodded and said that she understood. "The lady is tired," Lily said, "and the other one is not going anywhere. She has been waiting a very long time. She can wait a little longer." Catherine did not know what to say to that, so she just hugged her daughter and told her she loved her. The months that followed were a period of relative normalcy for the Matthews family. Lily started first grade and made friends with a girl named Sophia, who shared her love of horses. She learned to ride a bicycle without training wheels. She lost her first tooth and placed it carefully under her pillow, excited for the tooth fairy. To all outward appearances, she was a typical 6-year-old, full of energy and curiosity and joy. Only occasionally would she say something that reminded her parents of the deeper mystery she carried inside her. One evening, the family was watching a nature documentary about the African savanna. Lions appeared on screen, golden and majestic, sprawled across rocky outcroppings in the fading light. Lily, who was sitting on the floor with her coloring books, looked up and said, "They got it wrong, you know. The faces." Thomas glanced at her. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "The lion faces," Lily said, gesturing at the television. "On the big ones. The guardians." They were not always lion faces. Before, they were different. But people changed them because they forgot what the first faces looked like. Catherine and Thomas exchanged glances, but did not pursue the comment. They had learned that pressing Lily for details sometimes made her withdraw, and they preferred to let her share at her own pace. But later that night, Catherine could not sleep. She lay awake thinking about what Lily had said. The theory that the Sphinx had been recarved was not new. Some researchers had long argued that the proportions of the Sphinx's head were too small for its body, suggesting that a larger original head had been reshaped at some point in history. The prevailing theory was that the Sphinx originally had the head of a lion and was later recarved to depict a pharaoh, possibly Khafra. But this was a minority view, dismissed by mainstream Egyptology. Yet here was Lily, at 6 years old, casually referencing a controversial theory as though it were obvious fact. The Guardians were different before. People changed them because they forgot. Catherine wondered what else Lily knew that she had not yet shared. What other pieces of the puzzle were locked away in her daughter's memory, waiting for the right moment to surface. Dr. Mitchell called in November, almost a year after their last conversation. She had been working quietly on the radar data, collaborating with a small group of researchers who were willing to explore unconventional possibilities. They had refined their analysis and produced more detailed imaging of the subsurface structure. What they found was even more compelling than the initial results. The buried structure was definitively artificial, Dr. Mitchell reported. The symmetry was too precise, the angles too consistent to be natural. More importantly, they had identified what appeared to be a carved surface facing upward toward the sky. The surface had a curved shape that was consistent with the back of a sculpted figure. And at the depth they were measuring, this figure would have been approximately 60% the size of the known Sphinx, exactly the proportion that Lily had described in her drawings. There is more, Dr. Mitchell continued. We found what looks like a causeway, a stone pathway extending from the buried structure toward the existing Sphinx. It is at the same depth, covered by the same layer of sediment. If this is what we think it is, then the two monuments were connected. There was a road between them, just as Lily said. Catherine sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. She felt the weight of the revelation pressing on her chest. For a year she had allowed herself to believe that the mystery might fade, that Lily would grow up and forget her strange memories, that life would return to normal. But this phone call was confirmation that nothing would ever be quite normal again. What happens now? Catherine asked. Dr. Mitchell sighed. That is the question. The honest answer is that I do not know. We cannot excavate without permission, and permission is extremely unlikely to be granted. The Egyptian authorities have shown no interest in pursuing this investigation, and there are powerful institutional forces that prefer to leave certain questions unanswered. We could publish our findings, but that would likely result in our work being dismissed and our reputations damaged. Or we could wait. We could hope that eventually the evidence becomes too compelling to ignore. We could hope that the truth, as they say, will out. And what about Lily? Catherine asked. What happens to my daughter in all of this? Your daughter, Dr. Mitchell said softly, has given us a gift. Whether anyone ever acknowledges it or not, she has shown us that there are ways of knowing that we do not understand. She has reminded us that the past is not as distant as we think. Whatever happens with the research, whatever happens with the second Sphinx, please make sure she knows that what she has shared matters. She is not crazy. She is not making things up. She is remembering. And her memories are important. Catherine promised that she would tell Lily. When she hung up the phone, she sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, watching the afternoon light shift across the walls. She thought about her daughter, upstairs doing homework, a little girl with an ancient soul. She thought about the Sphinx, standing alone in the desert, waiting for its companion to rise from the sand. She thought about all the things we forget and all the things we choose not to remember, and she wondered what other secrets were buried beneath the surfaces of the world, waiting for a child's voice to call them back into the light. Lily came downstairs for a snack, and Catherine pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than usual. "What is wrong, Mama?" Lily asked. "Nothing is wrong," Catherine said. I just wanted to tell you that I love you, and that I believe you, about everything." Lily smiled, a smile that was both old and young at the same time. "I know you do," she said. And then, with the casual confidence that only children possess, she added, "She knows too. The other one. She is not lonely anymore. She knows people are looking for her now. That makes her happy." Catherine did not ask how Lily knew this. She had learned that some questions did not have answers that could be spoken. Some truths could only be felt, recognized, accepted. She smoothed her daughter's hair and handed her an apple and watched her skip back upstairs, humming a melody that sounded almost like something from very far away and very long ago. The Great Sphinx of Giza continues to guard the plateau, its ancient eyes gazing east toward the rising sun. Tourists come from around the world to photograph it, to marvel at its size and endurance, to wonder about the civilization that created it. They do not know that 100 meters to the south, beneath 12 meters of sand and sediment, something else may be waiting. A feminine form, a lost guardian, a secret kept for more than 2,000 years, now stirring in the darkness, sensing that its story is finally beginning to be told. Whether the second Sphinx will ever be excavated remains uncertain. The forces of institutional skepticism and political caution are powerful, and they have kept many secrets buried throughout history. But the evidence exists. The radar data shows what it shows. And in a quiet suburb of Denver, a little girl named Lily still sometimes draws two great cats facing each other across a sacred pathway, their eyes meeting in eternal vigil, waiting for the day when the truth will rise. Perhaps that day is coming. Perhaps it has already begun. Because once a secret starts to surface, once even a single voice speaks the truth, the process cannot be entirely stopped. The sand shifts, the memories emerge, and the guardians, who have waited so patiently for so very long, begin to remember that they were never meant to be alone. The chamber beneath the sand remains sealed. The feminine Sphinx continues her long sleep, but she is not forgotten. Not anymore. Because a 5-year-old girl in Denver looked at a photograph and asked the question that changed everything. Where is the other one? And now, thousands of people have heard that question. Thousands of minds are wondering. Thousands of voices are beginning to ask what else might be buried, what else might be waiting, what else we might have forgotten. Somewhere right now, another child is waking up from a dream they cannot explain. A dream of sand and stone and two great guardians facing each other in the golden light. A dream that feels more like a memory than imagination. A dream that leaves them with a strange certainty they cannot put into words. Perhaps that child will tell someone. Perhaps someone will listen. Perhaps, piece by piece, the memories will find their way back into the world. The second Sphinx has been waiting for more than 2,000 years. Perhaps she was waiting for you. Perhaps she was waiting for all of us to remember together. And perhaps, now that the remembering has begun, it cannot be stopped.